Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
We want to thank Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today, and while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping, Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a new quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinator insects, both wild and managed, before they disappear. The magazine is full of beautiful photos and informative articles, and from authors such as Dr. Marla Spivak, Dr. Mark Winston, and Kim Flatham. Learn more in our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kristen Trainer and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with the number 2. Their next issue should be coming out soon. Hey, Kim, we got a good podcast scheduled for today. In a bit, we'll be talking with Kelly Kulhanek from Bee Informed Partnership Sentinel Program.
Yeah, we did a program with the BIP people, Bee Informed Partnership, the BIP people a while back, and I think it's good to just kind of refresh people on all of the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
I really, really, really encourage you to take a look at their webpage. There's more information there than you can possibly imagine. More good scientific information, good practical applied information, good beekeeping information. You can trust what you read there. And there's so many places that I sometimes wonder.
Yep.
This place I'm sure about. And they've got the programs working with commercial beekeepers. They've got the Sentinel program we're going to talk about today. They got the survey that they do on colony losses. They are where it's at in terms of monitoring the beekeeping industry in this country, I think.
I look forward to
I'm looking forward to talking to Kelly.
It'll be real good. Well, before we get to Kelly, boy, the world has sure changed in the last few days since our last podcast. How are things in Medina?
Well, Medina shut down today. The AI Root Company shut its doors by governor's order, not essential. Candles aren't essential, according to the governor. So they sent everybody home. Kathy is home. She's going to be working from home for the next couple of issues, or at least the next issue. We're home. She's home for 2 weeks. So
wow.
She'll finish up the May issue. And Jerry's working from home, and the other two people, Amanda and Jean, are working from home. So we're probably better prepared to do that than a lot of people. I say we. They are probably better prepared to do that than a lot of people. But it's nice to be able to have that. Be able to do that from home.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was just thinking, the governor's going to think that candles are non-essential until the electric supply goes away. Then suddenly it'll become big business. I mean, who would have thought 2 weeks ago anyone would have thought people would be fighting over toilet paper? And look at it now.
Exactly. I just have to say this out loud though, Jeff. You do know that the Beekeeping Today podcast is the only safe way to keep bees with friends.
That's right. And it's absolutely right. We were on the leading edge. Well, speaking of COVID, and be serious a little bit. I mean, not that the closure of the AI Root Company is not serious, but the COVID-19, what are you hearing about the impact on the packaged bee business? I know a lot of beekeepers around here are gearing up to go get their packages or receive packages. You hearing anything?
Right now, I talked to a few people today, right now it's kind of a non-event because people aren't, they're not shipping yet in most places, and people aren't gathering together to pick up, when the truck pulls up to the local package supply person and 400 people show up that afternoon. That's probably not going to happen this year, but I don't know that because all of this is going to happen in this part of the country towards the end of April, first part of May. So this may all be gone. Yeah. I'm not holding my breath on that, if you'll pardon that pun. But right now, people are looking at it, thinking, okay, what do we, do we tell people to come between, 2 and 3 in the afternoon, 3 and 4 in the afternoon, that sort of thing, or do we spread them out over 3 or 4 days, or? And right now, it's a big unknown.
Man, I hope it doesn't impact anything because you have. You think of all the possibilities, and of course, package of bees are minimal compared to the loss of human life and all those struggles and tragedies that people are experiencing. But I hope it doesn't impact the package business because those bees. Well,
the thing is that I don't disagree. The thing is, you don't want them to impact the rest of the world either. You don't want a package of bees to cause someone to die because 400 people showed up in a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon. So, it's not to be taken lightly.
Well, most people, if you had a package of bees, you would get a 12-foot distance around you if you were holding it out in front of you. Beekeepers, though, they're always right up there. Oh, what'd you get? What'd you get? All right.
We had an idea earlier today. Kath was going to, I still think we're going to do it. Kath was going to put it on Facebook have me go out and sit by one of our beehives and, the ultimate in distance isolation. You're exactly right. Nobody's going to bother you within 6 feet if you're sitting next to a beehive.
No, I always thought that would be a good place.
Beekeeper.
Yeah. I always thought that a beehive would be a good place to hide money. But, now that I've said that, everyone's going to get into my beehives looking for my sack of gold.
Wait, did you hear the stories back in the day about people from Florida shipping bees to Maine to pollinate the wild blueberries up there and the things that were in those beehives?
Oh,
most of them illegal.
Seriously. Oh, my gosh.
Seriously.
Well, speaking of questions and answers, last month we had our series on beginning beekeeping, and we've had some letters come in. So instead of reading them, I thought it would be good to start reading them. Pick one a podcast for the next couple of months, and read them and let you answer them live on the podcast. So you ready for that?
I am ready.
All right. This comes from Elizabeth I. in Massachusetts, and she writes, Dear Kim and Jeff, thank you very much for your podcast. You've been keeping me company during my first year of hives, and I'm really looking forward to your beginning beekeeping series. My favorite podcast moment so far was the day your episode with Dr. Ramsey dropped. I was on my way to my first big beekeeping meeting and trying to listen in the car. I was so nervous. I couldn't pay attention, so I had to turn off the podcast. Turns out the friendly person sitting next to me in the auditorium was Dr. Ramsey, and if I had finished listening to your interview, I would have been too starstruck by him to not scream something like, "You're the Dr. Ramsey." It was embarrassing. So here's her question. Do I install a package of bees any differently when there is an established colony in the same apiary?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's one that you really need to pay attention to when you've got colonies of different ages in an apiary. The first major piece of advice is, of course, make it easy for the weaker colony to defend itself from robbing by the stronger colony. Because that stronger colony, they're just curious. They're going to smell new wax. They're going to see bees. They're going to see the feed on the feeder that you've got going. And they're going to just be curious. If they find something, they're going to go home and say, hey, guess what? I just found, all the food in the world, and let's go, girls, and take what we can get. So the first piece of advice is obviously restrict that opening to one bee. Make it as small as you can and probably face it in a different direction if you can. than the hive that's already existing there. And then watch it and see if you are getting some robbing by that other hive. And if that starts, you've got a problem, and you've got to do something, and you got to do it like an hour ago. So if you have to, shut the door. Just completely shut it. The bees inside have got food, and they'll be okay. They don't have to forage. The bees on the outside won't be able to get in. But by all means, protect the bees, protect the food in that hive and the bees in that hive.
Yeah.
And if it means shutting the door completely, go for it.
Yep. Save that colony and the new queen. And the only thing I would add to that is, if I can, I'll put them in a. If I don't have my apiary set up and it's a long line of hives. I try to put it either as far away from existing colonies or in a different location within the apiary, so that it's not sitting right next to beside the established colony.
Yep. If you can, that's a good way to do it. If you're stuck with a backyard in town, that's probably going to be tough. But yes, good advice.
All right, question 2. Elizabeth, it's kind of a longer question, so let me summarize it. She has some frames of existing foundation and some with foundation, and she has some frames with that are established with comb. And she's wondering, how does she integrate those into her existing colonies? And so, does she alternate the frames with comb with the frames with foundation, or does she just put them all in? And does she need to wire them?
Well, it's about 7 questions there, Jeff. Let's see. As I read the question, she wants to let them draw without plastic foundation. Just make their own comb in a frame. And putting an empty frame with or without wires, depending on where it's going to go later in the season. Is it going to be a honeycomb frame? Then you're going to have to put wires on it because it's going to go in an extractor. If it's going to be just a brood frame, then you don't have to have wires. It can't hurt. It can't hurt to put wires on them, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
But yes, if you can put an empty frame between 2 drawn frames, those 2 drawn frames will tell the bees how much room they have, because they're going to keep that space open between the finished new frame and the existing frame that you added. So they'll space it just right. And do you use a starter strip? It all has to do with how much wax from someplace you don't know you want to put in your beehive. And that starter strip is going to be wax from someplace you don't know. It's going to be foundation from some beehive somewhere that had something or not applied to it for mite control, or the bees in it were exposed to some agriculture pesticide. Anytime you're using foundation, you are introducing some level of contaminants to your beehive, and the less you can do, the better. And my advice is go the route you were talking about in terms of putting an empty frame between 2 drawn frames, and then gradually get rid of all the old comb from your hive. If your bees just aren't doing a good starter or a good comb, and a starter strip looks like the way to go, then that's the way to go. Most bees, most times, are going to do okay if you've got an empty frame between 2 drawn combs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't know. Have you ever let bees draw comb, Jeff, without foundation?
No, I have to say that I've always used some form of foundation. And years ago, it was all. I loved the foundation. I always liked wiring my frames. I don't know why. I thought it was just kind of a fun thing to do, and it was always a sense of accomplishment when it was done. Anyways, and now the plastic foundation, although I don't like it, is spoiled me, and just snap it in place, and then the box is complete. So
yeah, a couple of things. I like you. Plastic foundation is easy, fast, and it works well. The bees don't mind it. If you put 10 frames of plastic foundation in, they're going to be less anxious to work with you than if you can put in 2 or 3 and let them fill it in later. My experience has been without foundation is using drone comb as a mite draw, and we always put in an empty frame, no foundation, no starter strips, anything. And in our 8-frame boxes in 2 and 7, those positions. And I got drawn comb on either side of them, and it's perfect. So they draw it out perfect. They fill them up, just fine, and then you pull them in time. So no, you don't need foundation. No, you don't need a starter strip. But if it works, going to work better for you for those bees in that hive, then that starter strip is the way to go.
Yeah. Doesn't hurt to give it a try.
Yep, exactly right.
All right. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for your questions. And we will be reading more questions on the next podcast. Coming up, we have Kim's new book review, a new feature of the Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. This is our first book review, but we're going to try and do one most weeks. And it kind of comes down to how much time have I got to read books. So we'll see. But this week's book review is a new one that I just ran into a little bit ago. It's called Bee Club Basics, or How to Start a Bee Club. And with all of the people starting up bee clubs lately, because there's so many new beekeepers going, I found this one to be really, really useful. So the author has a background in management and public affairs, especially for nonprofits, and she uses that knowledge and her dedication to both honeybees and beekeepers to offer some guidance in organizing a beekeeping club. The author is Charlotte Ecker Wiggins, and she's from the St. Louis area in Missouri. It's really a fundamental book. It's just as practical, basic as you can get, but starting a club from scratch needs the basics at the beginning, not later when it's too late. This is where you start if you don't have a clue. And lots of people are used to going to meetings. How did that start? How did it get going? Where did it come from? How is it going to go into the future? That's what this book answers. She starts with what is the purpose of the club and what will the structure be, and the basics of getting a club started. There are legal issues addressed here too that often get overlooked until the treasury has disappeared. But then how formal do you want to make this? Do you want to make it an LLC, a corporation, more, less? Answer those questions first and save yourself a lot of grief down the road is really good advice. And next, where do you meet? And how much do you pay? And can you afford that much every month? And what does that place need to meet what your club will need every month? Enough room, chairs, access to all the amenities for coffee and such, easy access, parking. And what about IT requirements? And who's in charge? Good question. Officers, you can't live without them. Sometimes you can't live with them, but you can't live without them. And what do they need to do to be both a good officer and be able to do the job chosen for them? So how are they elected anyway? How do you run an election? That's a question we're going to get answered in this country here pretty soon. And who says that's the right way to do it? Figure that out right away. And how do you run a meeting, really? You ever hear of Robert's Rules of Order? That's a good place to start. At least be familiar with how that works. And here's a tough one. What about insurance? Well, you need some, especially if you'll be working bees at somebody's house or at a club bee yard, or bees and people sometimes don't mix. And what about the place where you meet? Are they going to want insurance in case you do something stupid? And they don't want to have to cover you, and they want you to have insurance. So find out before you ever have a meeting. Communication's good. Good communication, however, can be difficult. A newsletter, for sure. Maybe. Paper, digital, both. What about your social media people? You got somebody that knows Facebook and Instagram and all of those things? And what about news releases for the local newspapers announcing your meetings and any events you're going to have? You got to do them. So whose job is it? And other volunteers. Who sets up the chairs? Who takes them down? Who puts them away? Who makes the coffee? What about the program chair? And what have we missed here? Getting and keeping volunteers can be a real challenge. And continuity is really important. Programs. How do you pay for them? Where do you get speakers? Who gets the speakers? Who do you know that can speak at a bee meeting? And what to do, and planning ahead for a few months, and then you get into that communication thing about being able to put the speaker in 3 months in the newsletter so people can plan on showing up. Classes. Got a beginner's class coming up? I bet you do. I bet you're going to one. Who planned it? How did it work? How do you make a beginner's class work? And who's going to teach? And is that person a good teacher? And organizing the swarm list? You got a swarm list this summer, and keeping it up to date is important. And how about that website for your club? Who's going to run that for you? Who makes that happen all of the time and keeps it up to date? These and a lot more questions are addressed in this book. It's easy to use, has lots of good questions, and as already stated, is incredibly basic in its organization and advice. And that's okay when you're trying to figure out where to get a web page person and how to run a meeting and where did you say the restrooms were? But there's a ton of more advanced info in the references section that takes you to step 2, 3, 4, and beyond in this, what's obviously going to be an adventure. Even if you have a club up and running, this book will help it run better. And who doesn't want that, right? So, Bee Club Basics, or How to Start a Bee Club by Charlotte Ecker Wiggins. You can get it at most bookstores, certainly on the internet, and it's worth your time if you're in this adventure of running a bee club.
Thanks a lot, Kim. I'm looking forward to the future book reviews. Those will be really good. All right, let's get going with our discussion with Kelly Kulhanek from BIP Partnership and the Sentinel Program. Kelly, welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast and joining Kim and I.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet.
Kelly, it's good to see you again. Kelly and I were at the Maryland meeting, wasn't it? Maryland.
Yeah, that's right.
It was a kind of a joint Maryland-Washington, D.C. beekeepers meeting just a little bit ago, and that's where we met. And I found out all about this program, and I just had to get her on here so we could talk more about it.
It'd be great.
Kelly, welcome. I'm glad you could make it.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
So what got my attention was when we were talking, you mentioned a lot about the Sentinel Hive program, and I know a little bit about it, but I also know that you're looking for a lot more people to get involved in this. So can you tell us what it is and why I should get involved?
Yes, absolutely. So the Sentinel Apiary Program is a colony health monitoring program that is run by the Bee Informed Partnership, which is the nonprofit that's headquartered at our lab at University of Maryland. So the Sentinel Apiary Program was started by BIP in 2015 with the original idea that they would sort of act as these central hubs of colony health and diagnostics, and these beekeepers would keep track of their colony health over a whole year or longer, and that these apiaries could sort of act as an early warning system for anything that might be popping up in their apiary, and then we could share that information with other beekeepers in their area so that everybody could sort of be forewarned and have timely colony management and good response time for that. So that was sort of the initial idea. And since then, in 2015, when we started, it was only really in the state of Maryland. It was actually crowdfunded through the University of Maryland. So we had a lot of Maryland participants, but not really very many in any other states. And since then, it's really sort of evolved quite a bit. So in 2019, that was our 5th year of the program. We had 106 registered participants, and I think we've had Sentinel apiaries in 30 states across the U.S. So we're really happy with the amount we've been able to grow it in that amount of time. It's always just like 1 or 2 people working on the program at BIP. So it really has been a labor of love for us growing the program. And, what we found is beekeepers have really sort of enjoyed taking on this program and really making it their own. So we have a lot of newer beekeepers who enroll and use the program as a good way to learn, really good colony management. It sort of teaches you how to perform a really good colony health inspection. And then it also really importantly teaches really active varroa monitoring and management. So, we know that the average beekeeper is maybe monitoring for mites 2 or 3 times a year at most, and is probably performing some sort of control method only like 1 or 2 times per year. And, we see through studies and through surveys over and over again that that's not really enough. So the Sentinel Apiary Program has you perform a full colony health inspection, take a sample of adult bees, and then respond to your varroa levels once a month for 6 months. So we're doing this every month from May to October. So beekeepers have really used it as a way to sort of force themselves to learn these really good habits around colony health and varroa management. So, sorry, go ahead.
I want to interrupt you here for a second, Kelly.
Yeah.
Since the people who have these colonies, some of them are rigorous in mite control, and some of them are less than rigorous, and some of them are on the other end of the scale, not doing any treatments at all. And so what you're seeing is being able to compare and contrast those management schemes. At the same time, then you're being able to look at lines of bees that may be showing some resistance because they're not being treated yet. The mite samples are coming in. You're counting mites, and there's mites, but the colonies aren't dying. Are you seeing any of that?
So, over the course of the program, we've only had a relatively small number of beekeepers who don't use any treatments at all. Usually a beekeeper who's enrolling in the program is already interested in active varroa management and things like that. We do have a few who don't use any treatments or use only non-chemical treatments or use sort of unconventional control methods, which is always really fun to see what people come up with. But yes, we are able to sort of compare how those different methods are working. And then, we can in turn interpret those results and then give recommendations to beekeepers based on how well these things are working in Sentinel apiaries. So by participating in the program, you are kind of doing a little bit of trial and error for your fellow beekeepers where we can sort of see what's working and what's not, and then turn around and recommend the things that we do think are working.
So this is open to all beekeepers then?
Yes, this is open to all beekeepers. We mostly have hobbyist beekeepers, but we are starting to get more interest from commercial beekeepers. It's a little bit complicated for migratory beekeepers because it should be the same colonies over the whole 6 months, which can get complicated if you're moving pallets around. But we are trying to get better at accommodating all beekeepers of different shapes and sizes.
So what's the application process like?
So right now, we don't have any cap on enrollment. We're just trying to grow it as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So really all you need to do to enroll is to go to beinformed.org/sentinel, and you will fill out a little survey about yourself as a beekeeper. We just want to get to know sort of your background as a beekeeper and different management practices that you typically use and things like that. There is a cost to participate in the program. So right now we have a 4-colony kit or an 8-colony kit. And the 4-colony kit is $275, and the 8-colony kit is $499. So you fill out the survey, and then you can pay by credit card right there on the website, and then you're enrolled, and we'll send you your sampling kit, which includes all the materials you need to take samples from each of those colonies for 6 months, and also includes really great information on how to perform a health inspection and data sheets and all the other materials you'll need. And we'll send that to you by mid-April so that you can begin sampling in May. So
it goes from May to October, May to November?
Yeah, we try to do May through October, and we try to get everyone to do that so that it's more comparable between all the apiaries since they're being sampled at the same time. We do have beekeepers who can't get started till later in the season or, further south, it's warmer and they can sample longer, and people are more than welcome to do that as well if they can't start until June or July.
Is there someone there, Be Informed, who can assist the beekeeper if they get their kit and they have questions about doing the samples or making a collection?
Yes, absolutely. So I help manage the Sentinel Apiary program, but Dan Reynolds at the Be Informed Partnership is the main manager of the program. And you can reach him through the Contact Us tab on the Be Informed website, but I can also give his email for you guys to put on the information that you post with this podcast.
Yes.
But yeah, when you enroll with the program, you're basically getting direct access to us experts at the Be Informed Partnership who can help you with your kit, and then also if you have any management questions throughout the season.
Oh, very cool. It sounds like a great program. That sounds like a great, for $215, is that $215 or $275? I can't read my writing. 275.
175.
I'm sorry?
175 for the 4 colony
Oh,
kit.
175. So I got it all messed up. 175. I mean,
maybe I misspoke.
That's 175 for 4 colonies and $4.99 for 8.
Yes.
And but that's
now I'm confusing myself.
No, that's right. I wouldn't be surprised if I was confusing you. I mean, that's really for what a beekeeper's doing. I think that's that's almost nothing for the information education that beekeeper would gain.
Yeah, I think it comes out to about $7 a sample, whatever it is, which is the exact cost that it takes us to, provide those materials and have the labor to process the samples and generate the reports. So we're not making any money off of it. We wanted to keep it as accessible as possible. And it's really our most cost-effective program at that $7 a sample. It's much cheaper than like what a commercial beekeeper is paying for tech team samples. So we really want it to be accessible to as many people as possible.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I guess I should also mention we have a great partnership with the American Beekeeping Federation, and they are sponsoring a number of ABF members for $100 off a Sentinel Apiary kit. So if you're an ABF member, again, you can reach out to us and we can give you that promotional code to enter on the website. And then you're getting an even better deal because you get $100 off the kit. So we've been really happy with that partnership. The last year was the first year, and then we're doing it again this year. So
actually, I used to be a member of ABF. I apologize for that, but the I mean, that $100 savings might go towards a good membership to a good organization. So just something to think about for any beekeeper looking for an excuse to join American Beekeeping Federation.
Yeah, I think for a hobbyist beekeeper, the registration is like $60. So you still come out ahead with, the discount and your ABF membership. So we think it's a pretty good deal.
Perfect.
One of the things that maybe not yet with the numbers that you have, but I can see gradually growing is your data is going to show trends in different parts of the country. And I'll throw this in just because I can, is our climate change, whatever you want to call it, is causing things to happen differently. I have friends in North Carolina that they're like 3 or 4 weeks ahead of where they were last year. I'm going to guess that you're going to see the same sort of things changing in the monitoring numbers that you're getting because of this also. And are you already seeing some of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this has been a weird year for a lot of people. It's been a very mild winter in a lot of places. I know a lot of people are already, I'm seeing posts from Florida and stuff, people are already like adding supers and things. So it's kind of crazy. The cool thing about Sentinel data is it is the only data Be Informed collects that, is multiple samples from the same colonies over an entire year. And we have a lot of beekeepers who participate for multiple years. So we can actually look at those trends over time. A lot of Be Informed samples, it's just sort of a snapshot of a single time period. We get maybe one sample, one health inspection in one location at one time. But Sentinel is very unique in that it's the same colonies for that full 6 months. So it's really the most powerful data we collect at Be Informed. And we can use it to look at all sorts of things. And we actually are starting a project now. We're seeking funding for it now to look at different weather patterns. And specifically, there's been a lot of interest in extreme weather events and how that sort of affects colony health and the things we see. So again, these are things that are occurring over really long time periods that we wouldn't really be able to look at with a shorter term program. So we're really excited about the potential of this data. And, now that it's been 5 years, we're just sort of getting to a place where it's big enough to where we can really look at those large trends. So, the bigger it grows, the more data we collect, the more valuable that becomes, and the more finely we can look at the details. So right now, I think we have enough participants to sort of look at broad differences between, say, the northern U.S. and the southern U.S. But if we get enough participants in each state, then we can start to look at state level differences and maybe even county level differences someday. So yeah, really, the sky's the limit and everyone's welcome, and we just want to grow it as much as possible. So
The other thing that I looked at this at is you're acting sort of as a, how do you call it, an internal aphis. They look at pests coming into the U.S. and we don't have that for bees because we don't import bees, but these pests somehow manage to show up anyway. So you might be the first one to find tropalaps in a colony just by accident.
Oh.
They didn't. The beekeeper didn't know. Yeah.
Don't even bring it up, Kim.
But
yeah.
it's kind of good to have that because there's nobody else really looking. I know a lot of states have inspectors, but a lot of states don't.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of beekeepers are being tested by those, but a lot of them aren't. And this sample might show something new that nobody else would find. And you get your foot in the door early and be able to stop it. No, that's probably not going to happen. But at least you know about it. So I think that's a good thing too. Are you looking for weird and strange things when you're looking at these samples?
Yeah, so, we do also perform the APHIS honeybee disease survey. So that is looking for tropalaps and things like that specifically, but those samples are only occurring at 2 time points, once in the spring and once in the fall. So, that again was sort of the original idea of this program, was to sort of act as an early warning system and to have all these sentinel beekeepers placed in all these different locations around the country, really actively looking at their bees. So yeah, I don't see why not. There's definitely a potential that, God forbid, we would find a tropalaps spike and hopefully be able to do something about it. Hopefully it would be like in a coastal state and wouldn't have already migrated all the way inward, but yeah.
Well, the samples are also tested for nosema too. Both nosemas?
Great question. So yes, the samples are processed in our lab for varroa, and then we crush 100 bees, and we are just looking for nosema cerana.
Just cerana. Okay. Mm-hmm. And are you seeing, as I understand it, nosema apis is declining in numbers, both numbers of hives infected and infections per bee. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, so I think the reason that we decided to just go with cerana is because apis wasn't as much of an issue anymore. And, we're always trying to respond to what the beekeepers are asking for. And beekeepers were much more concerned with cerana than apis. So I think that's sort of where we decided to focus our attention, was on cerana.
So over the course of a year, kind of a broad generalization, but then you're counting spores for cerana, and how does that population grow over the course of a year so that I, as a beekeeper, need to know when I should be concerned before I should be concerned?
Mm-hmm. So nosema is almost always highest in the spring. It's kind of wet conditions, the colony is small. So if there is an infection, the ratio of spores to bees is just higher because it's concentrated among a much smaller adult bee population. And we get a lot of beekeepers who send in their first couple samples and they have kind of high nosema, and then they kind of panic and they ask us, what should I do? Like, especially with fumagillin kind of going on and off market, people panic and they're like, yeah, what can I do about this? It almost always clears up on its own. If you have an otherwise healthy colony, once the population starts growing, if you get a little bit of a honey flow on, and they start picking up, usually they clear up the nosema on their own and it doesn't really remain an issue. So normally we just tell people to wait it out just another month or two. And they almost never actually see real symptoms of nosema disease, the dysentery and things like that. It's usually just sort of, an underlying symptom in the colony, and then it sort of clears up by the fall.
So you're seeing those kind of numbers come in and they're somewhat predictable. So, that's from a beekeeper's perspective, that's good to know. As there's not doing anything probably is good as trying to be active on this particular problem.
Right. Yeah. And the tech teams that work with the commercial beekeepers, they've done some analysis on whether or not it seems like treating with fumagillin actually helps or not. And it's kind of unclear whether it really helps at an operation level or in the long term. So yeah, we normally recommend that people just try to wait it out.
All right.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the online, you have your reports from the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So those are really good, valuable information.
Yeah.
Is that, I don't have a question there. I just, those are, I think even if you don't participate in the Sentinel program, going out and looking at those reports would be very, very valuable.
Yeah, so that's another really important aspect, I think, of the program is that we try to make as much of this data and information available to all beekeepers as possible. So the Bee Informed Partnership has a research portal at research.beeinformed.org. And you can actually go on there and click on Sentinel Apiaries. And then you'll see a map of the US, and you can click on each state and then click on each county that has a Sentinel Apiary in it. And you can actually see how the mite loads in that county fluctuated over the season. So we are trying to make this as accessible to everyone as possible. Again, that sort of idea of an early warning system so that if you know there's a Sentinel apiary in your county and you haven't monitored for mites yourself yet, and then you go onto our website and you see that the Sentinel apiary in your county is exceeding, 3 mites per 100 bees, now you know that maybe you might have a problem also because it's becoming an issue in your area, and you can go on there and check and be warned and then sort of get ahead of it in your own colonies.
And that's tied with the scale program too. Is the scale program that you have, is that part of this? That's not part of Sentinel, but it's part of the data gathering, isn't it?
Yeah. So originally, a hive scale was a required aspect of the Sentinel Apiary program. So everyone who enrolled in Sentinel had to purchase a hive scale and have it on one of their Sentinel hives. We kind of moved away from that because it was sort of cost prohibitive and it was excluding people from being able to participate. So we just made the hive scales optional. So now the hive scale program is sort of a separate BIP program. And if you have a hive scale, any beekeeper with a hive scale can opt in to share their data with Bee Informed. And that will appear on our hive scale map. Again, it's a map of the US, and the states kind of change color based on if they're gaining or losing weight collectively. And you can click on each individual hive scale and see how the weights are fluctuating over time. You can, we're in Maryland and we get no fall honey flow. So I like to tell our beekeepers to look at a place like Michigan where they make all their honey in the fall and be sad and jealous. And a lot of them have temperature gauges too. So you can actually see how the temperature is fluctuating as well. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool information on that website.
I went out there and I had to check, and yes, my hives are part of the scale program, and they're up to date. So I was happy to see that everything was working.
Right. Yeah. Every once in a while, it stops communicating properly. But yeah, we have a good IT team that can help people sort that out if they're having that issue.
Good. And all these links, and I'll mention this now, all the links that you've referenced for the Sentinel program, the scale program, the contacts, I'll provide those in the show notes. So anybody
Perfect.
listening can go back and reference those there.
Great.
As I'm thinking about it, can you go back and talk a little bit more about what a beekeeper should expect signing up for the program?
Yeah, you go to our website and you enroll in the program. You pay by credit card, and then we will mail you your kit in mid-April. Then you can go ahead and start taking samples in May. So we do 1 sample per month from May to October in each colony. So if you have 4 or 8 colonies. And basically what you'll do is you'll go through each colony, you'll perform a really good health inspection, you'll take really nice detailed notes on your data sheet, and you'll take a sample of about 300 adult bees from each colony and put it in the provided saltwater bottle. We use saltwater instead of alcohol because it's easier to ship, but it's super saturated saltwater, so the bees don't rot or anything like that. So you'll put the bees in the bottles, you seal them up, you send them along with your data sheet back to our lab at the University of Maryland. And then we have an amazing army of undergraduate students who will work through your samples and help process them. They get shaken for varroa, they get processed for nosema under the microscope. And then we put all of that data, as well as anything that you wrote on your data sheet, any notes that you took, into a report. And we'll send you that report within about 2 weeks of us receiving the sample. So we're trying to get them back to you as quickly as possible. It's often faster than 2 weeks, but in our busy season, it kind of can stretch to about 2 weeks. But we're trying to get your mite levels and nosema levels back to you as soon as possible so that you can, do good management if you have an issue. But basically, at the end of the season, after all 6 months that you've submitted samples and data sheets, all of your notes on all of those colonies are in one document. So you have this amazing record of everything that happened in those colonies over the whole 6 months. And I know some beekeepers that take really good notes, but I think most of us are terrible at it, especially if it's hot and you're getting stung and your hands are full and you're distracted. So it is really a great practice to keep really good notes. And we really recommend doing that whether you participate in the program or not. Because the more that you familiarize yourself with these long-term trends, the more you can get used to what your colonies typically do, and the better predictions you can make in years to come. You can be more prepared if you know, when you might need to add supers or pull supers or add mite treatments or things like that. It just, the longer that you pay attention to these trends, the more prepared you can be in the future. So the program is really great for that. It's also a really good teaching tool. We have a lot of beekeeping clubs who participate in the program, and they sort of use it, as a teaching tool for any new beekeepers that join their organization. So, if you want to teach your neighbors good mite management, which you most definitely do, they can come in and help take the samples and learn to do a health inspection and things like that. So we think it has a really good application as a teaching tool also.
I would think so.
Yeah.
So if I send you a sample of my 300 bees and there's 41 mites in that sample, are you going to make a recommendation to me about something I should do?
So we don't normally make recommendations. If you ask us, what should I do? Then we'll help you and we can make a recommendation. We love to refer people to the Honeybee Health Coalition Varroa Guide. That's sort of a great tool to help you decide which treatment or control method is right for you. Because, it depends on what else is going on, the temperature, if you have supers on, things like that. So, doing something is definitely recommended, but we usually don't make recommendations unless people ask.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a fair assessment because everybody's different and what you might. Okay. All right. What else have we missed here, Jeff?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is serious. I was looking at your online, and it says in 2020 you're going to have an app for entering notes, so it's not all handwritten at this point. So you could use a pad or an iPhone or a phone?
Yeah. So we actually think it's going to be pushed back another year to 2021. Our IT team is amazing, and they are working really hard to develop this app, and they don't feel comfortable putting forth something that's not 100% ready, which we definitely agree with. We don't want Sentinel participants to be the ones who are like troubleshooting the issues with this app in some sort of weird beta version. So we're just going to hold off until it's totally.
Yeah, everyone knows the experience of putting an app out to the public too soon these days.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, but we're really excited about the app when it does come out. We think it's going to be great added value for the beekeeper. So it's basically going to be like a full-on management app. You can take notes on everything you're doing to your colonies. And then actually built into that, we might be able to give recommendations based on what we're seeing,
Nice.
Like an automatic recommendation could pop up.
Yeah.
So we're really excited for the potential of that. All your reports and your mite loads and stuff would automatically go into the app as well. So we think that's going to be a really cool tool for our more tech-savvy beekeepers. We will still have paper available for people who don't want to, get propolis and stuff all over their phone or iPad or whatever. But we think that'll be a really cool addition to the program.
I think that sounds really appealing. The other follow-up question to you mentioned earlier, the alternative treatment methods, and I have to ask, what is the most unusual or unique treatment method you've seen listed on your report?
Oh, okay. A couple come to mind. We had one beekeeper who was smoking his colonies with like rhubarb and sumac leaves, which probably smelled good. I'd have to actually look and see if that was effective or not. I don't remember off the top of my head. And then we had another beekeeper who thought that when his bees were more agitated, they were more hygienic and they were better at cleaning off mites. So he would insert like a piece of glass into his colonies, and he would have his colonies sting the piece of glass. They couldn't actually sting it because that would have killed all the bees, but they would attempt to sting this piece of glass. And then he felt that level of agitation, I think it probably increased the mite drop or something like that. So yeah, we definitely see some interesting things.
Well, absolutely. And I was curious because you mentioned the rhubarb, and because I was reading earlier sometime this winter, something somewhere, I think in Poland, they were using big leaves of rhubarb and putting them inside the hive for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. And because of the oxalic acid in the rhubarb, theoretically.
Yeah.
So I was curious if that would actually showed up.
Yeah, I think that was the basis for it, is that rhubarb is a source of oxalic acid. And we use thyme oil, and that's from the thyme plant. So yeah, I don't think his logic was really that far off. We love to see the things beekeepers come up with. It's a very creative community, and I love to see people's ingenuity and their inventiveness. And yeah, I think especially hobbyist beekeepers who sort of have more time to tinker with things, they come up with really cool, interesting ideas.
Out here in Washington, I'm not surprised at some point someone will come up with CBD oil for varroa treatment.
Yeah, definitely. That does not seem far down the line.
Absolutely.
You'll have mites, but you won't care.
Be very relaxed about it. Yeah.
You mentioned an app coming up in the future, maybe next year, but have you also looked at taking your program and marrying it with one of these other, like Hive Tracks or any of these Broodminder or any of these that would give you some basic hive condition data when the sample's being taken by the beekeeper and getting a broader picture, perhaps?
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we've thought about marrying with those other app producers yet. The basis for our app was coming from the tech teams have now actually all started entering their data on an iPad, on a tablet, through an app. So we think we can fairly simply adapt the tech team app to fit the Sentinel program, with the addition of being able to enter management data and things like that. So that's sort of the basis of where our app was coming from. But yeah, it would be interesting to sort of combine databases and, be able to compare between different things like that.
Yeah, it would be. I think it'd be a bigger picture.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the bigger picture, the better. So yeah.
Yep. Excellent. All right. Well, I'm glad you and I were at that meeting at the same time, because it turned me on to this, and it got us to get you up here and share all of this information. And I hope that you get 1,000 people signing up this year.
Great. 1,000 might be more than we can handle, but that would be pretty amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
That'd be good.
It would be really good.
Okay.
It'd be a good problem to have.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Kelly, really appreciate you joining us today on Beekeeping Today podcast, and look forward to hearing more. Maybe we can have you back next winter when you have some of the analysis done for the 2020 year and find out how everyone did this year.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been fun talking to you guys. And yeah, I hope everybody can at least get something out of the Sentinel Apiary program, even if they're not a participant.
I'm sure they will.
Good.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye-bye. I really enjoyed having Kelly on the show. And, the Sentinel Apiary program, I think, is really important. And I'd really like to see more beekeepers get involved. And I'm thinking about joining that myself this year.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. One of the things I wanted to make sure we got the prices right, it was $275 for 4 colonies and $4.99 for 8 colonies. And let me tell you, for what you're getting for that money, 6 months of samples, and they're going to tell you what's going on. And I really got to, after listening to all of the things that this Sentinel program does, the one thing that really, to me, makes it worth every penny that people can put into it is that early warning system. Mm. If you got a lot of people out there and just taking samples, not even knowing what they're taking samples of, sending them into people who do, and suddenly they find, something that could end beekeeping forever or whatever. But it's we were just talking about what's going on in this virus, and if we get if we get a head start on something that could go wrong with beekeeping, I think well, I can't say enough for it. I'm glad they're doing it. It's worth every penny, and I encourage everybody to do it.
I agree. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download or stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their sponsorship of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments to questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else for today, Kim?
Well, I guess if I have anything, Jeff, it's check out the BIP webpage. There's just so much good information on there that you can trust, with your life. Check it out, and you'll be glad you did.
And your bees' lives. Lives, not wives. Lives. All right, Kim.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Stay safe, wash your hands, and keep your social distance.